There's breaking news out of the Middle East this morning where a long-awaited ceasefire has finally come into force in Gaza overnight. Israel's army has confirmed the return of the first 3 hostages that were being held by Hamas. Romy Gonen, Doran Steinbrecher and Emily Damari were released to the Red Cross overnight before being handed over to the Israeli military and flown to a hospital in Tel Aviv.
In Gaza, thousands of people have started returning to begin the process of picking up the pieces and rebuilding their homes. Over the next 6 weeks, 30 more hostages are due to be released in exchange for hundreds of Palestinians. But negotiations between the two sides have already been marred by delays. To take us through how this fragile ceasefire deal eventually came into effect, we're joined by postdoctoral research fellow with University of Melbourne, Dr. Marika Sosnowski. Good to see you, Marika. Thanks very much for joining us on the program.
Thanks, Bridget.
Tell us just how important is this ceasefire and how historic is it, Marika?
Look, it's very important, of course, after the last 15 months of the current war in Gaza. It's great to have a ceasefire deal now that's now in effect. So it's great to see that. And I think the terms of this agreement are actually quite similar in many ways to the truce deal that happened around about 12 months ago at sort of end of November, early December 2023. So they sort of follow a similar pattern in terms of a release of hostages in the Gaza Strip being held by Hamas and other actors there in exchange for prisoners that Israel is holding. So it's very similar to that deal in that there's a very choreographed way that the hostages will be released and then the prisoners will be released, and different things will happen around that sort of exchange, except that this deal, of course, is a lot longer in time frame. So this first phase of this deal is 42 days, 6 weeks, whereas that other deal was 5 days initially plus another 2 days that were added on.
And why is that historic or significant, Marika, in terms of the time frame and that staged release? Is that to give each side an opportunity to ensure that the other side honours its side of the bargain in essence?
Effectively, with ceasefires, look, you can put anything into these type of deals that the parties want to. And so I think in a way, these type of ceasefire deals are best thought of as a type of contract. So the parties to this agreement have gone to a lot of trouble to negotiate quite specific terms of this agreement, particularly in the first phase. And obviously they've thought 42 days is a number that they've chosen. They think that will allow time for the hostages, different things to happen during that time, including a lot of aid coming into the Gaza Strip, potentially some rebuilding, rubble being cleared, people in the Gaza Strip being allowed back to their homes, as well as the release of a number of hostages over that whole phase of 42 days, as well as the release of Palestinian prisoners. So it really depends on the parties to a conflict what they decide. And in this case, that first phase is going to be 42 days, hopefully continued by 2 other phases of similar amount of time that will prolong the ceasefire.
And Marika, which other international actors were crucial in this, in coming to an agreement that had been long hoped for such a long time?
Well, obviously, President Biden of the United States has said this agreement in terms of its content is very much based on the agreement and the text that he put forward in May of last year. And you can see that very much in the text of the agreement. It's even specifically referenced in the text of this agreement. So that the US has certainly been a major player here. Obviously, the other guarantors of this agreement are Egypt and Qatar. Qatar's played a large role as the mediator here. And then with Trump coming into office, it's unclear exactly how much of a role him and his Middle East envoy have played in getting this deal done. But it does seem with the timing of it, specifically because Trump's inauguration is imminent, that probably has played some sort of role in pressuring Israel, particularly in terms of to accept these sort of terms of the agreement, which arguably could have been accepted way back in May when Biden proposed them the first time around.
Dr. Marika Sosnowski, thanks very much for your expertise this morning. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure, Bridget. Thank you.
Meanwhile, in the United States, President Joe Biden has spoken about the ceasefire as he prepares to leave office. Donald Trump is holding a final political rally ahead of his inauguration tomorrow in Washington, D.C. Our North America correspondent, Carrington Clark, is pretty busy, but he's back in the studio now, looking much warmer than he did earlier in the program. Carrington, Joe Biden has defended his approach to reaching this ceasefire overnight.
Yeah, that's right. Joe Biden has been heavily criticised for his handling of the war in Gaza. From the progressive wing of his own Democratic Party, there have been accusations that he's enabled Israel to bombard Gaza, leading to the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinians, while Republicans have criticised him for not doing enough to get the hostages back sooner. But today, the president says that the path that he wore, trying to get a diplomatic solution to this intractable war, was the right path to tread.
Some said my policy of a firm support for Israel was relentlessly pursuing diplomacy, risked drawing America into a wider war in the region. I listened to those voices, many of whom I respected a great deal, but I concluded abandoning the course I was on would not have led us to the ceasefire we're seeing today. But instead, it would have risked a wider war in the region that so many feared.
Now, both Joe Biden and the incoming President Donald Trump have claimed that this ceasefire agreement was struck because of the pressure that they were exerting on both Israel and Hamas. We wait to see how the history books judge it, but the war in Gaza will be one of the issues that Joe Biden is remembered for. And the question, of course, whether or not people believe that he played a positive role in trying to end the war, or whether or not it was he who enabled it to be so prolonged.
And Carrington, you were at President-elect Trump's rally earlier in the show. What's he up to today?
Yeah, so this is the last night before Donald Trump becomes once again the President of the United States. He is holding a rally in downtown Washington, D.C. It is atrocious out there, and it is expected to get even worse tomorrow. This rally has taken on even greater importance for his supporters. Tens of thousands of them have travelled to Washington, D.C. They had hoped to be on the National Mall when Donald Trump was sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. The outdoor components of that inauguration, though, have been cancelled. So this rally is one of the last chances they have to get up close to their hero. Unfortunately, there is just not the capacity in that arena to accommodate all the people who wanted to be inside. So you're going to have tens of thousands of people disappointed after waiting for hours upon hours in quite frigid conditions. But we are getting a taste of what Donald Trump will do in the first few hours of his new presidency. He has said that he will be signing an executive order in order to prolong TikTok's ability to operate in the United States. Now, the ban that was passed by the Congress has come into effect today, which means that people can't access the TikTok app through app stores. But if you do have the TikTok app on your phone already, there is the ability to continue using it now that TikTok has walked back its own preliminary removal of service from the United States. And they've done that after that statement was released by Donald Trump. But there is a live question about whether or not Donald Trump possesses the unilateral power to effectively override a decision by the Congress. But that's the statement that he put out today, asking companies to not let TikTok stay dark, saying that he will issue that executive order on Monday to extend the period of time before the law's prohibitions take effect. Now, that question about whether or not he can actually override the will of the Congress remains to be seen, but Donald Trump likes to make a deal, and the deal that he seems to be seeking in this particular instance is for an American company to buy into TikTok and take half control of that company, which he believes would allow it to overcome the concerns around national security, which was the reason why the Congress had banned TikTok.
All right, Carrington Clark, thank you. And Bridget, I'm reliably informed from people who just might have set up an account while they're in the United States that TikTok is back up and running.
Back.
Yeah,
Gosh, that was quick.
But it's going to be very, very cold though. -4 today with some snow. -9 in Washington, a low tomorrow with a top of -4, and then Wednesday -10. Goodness.
That is
with wind
painful.
chill. No, I can understand why they're not outside.
Painful weather. Well, a bit more weather news for us this morning, and what's happening in WA.
Yeah, that's right, Bridget. So an emergency warning along WA's Pilbara coast has been expanded as a Category 2 cyclone threatens lives and homes. People in the region from Barrow Island to Ningaloo, including Northwest Cape, are being urged to shelter indoors. Heavy rains and flash flooding are likely. Destructive winds of up to 120 kilometres an hour are thrashing the coast, with gusts of up to 150 kilometres an hour possible if the system tracks further south. The search will continue today for a 53-year-old Queensland man feared to have been swept away in floodwaters on the New South Wales coast. Police believe the man was trying to cross a causeway in a ute near Limponwood, south of the Queensland border, before he went missing Saturday night. The vehicle was found 400 metres downstream, but the driver is still missing. 2 teenagers have died at a popular waterfall on Queensland's Sunshine Coast. Police say a 17-year-old girl disappeared after falling into Falls yesterday afternoon. A 17-year-old boy who jumped into the water to try to save her also died. The waterfall will remain closed while officers investigate. The Queensland Government has announced it will roll out GPS trackers for high-risk domestic violence offenders. From the 1st of July, 150 of the worst offenders will be monitored around the clock to protect victims. It comes as a man faces court today for attempted murder after allegedly setting a woman alight over the weekend. Some young couples are turning to antique and heirloom jewellery to celebrate their engagements. Jewellers and antique sellers say the appetite for repurposed stones and settings is growing amid the cost of living crisis and increasing ethical concerns over diamond mining.
And its scent has been likened to death, cat vomit, yes really, and rotting fish. But Antophiles are excitedly waiting for Sydney's corpse flower to bloom. The rare plant is being live streamed and it's expected to bloom for the first time in almost 20 years. In other states like Victoria, the flower's deathly stench has done little to scare people away, with many keen to get a close sniff. In the short 24 hours, the flowers last every few years. And when it bloomed in Geelong late last year, it made international headlines.